Good afternoon, good evening, good morning to some of you guys around the world. And my name is Brandon Lee, and I just want to thank everyone for taking the time to join this FSLogix webinar with myself and Dave Young. So today on this webinar, we're going to go through a variety of topics, including our solutions, our workspace, and also discuss our latest product development called Cloud Cache. And in this particular webinar, we'll also have a nice demo that Dave Young will take us through that will show all of our products in action and really just show how easy it is to use FSLogix and to effectively test it as well. And at the end, we will conclude with a nice Q&A session to allow everyone a chance to ask their questions and get some technical insight from Dave. So as you can see here, FSLogix is a leading innovator of solutions that reduce the amount of hardware, time, and labor required to support desktop virtualization and improve overall workforce productivity. So Dave, one thing I've been hearing a lot is that there's a lot of movement going on in your particular space. Can you expand a little bit upon that?
Yeah, so thank you very much, Brandon. It has been very, very busy for me. So if any of you have heard me speak before, maybe haven't heard me speak, I joined FSLogix, it's hard to believe, a little over 3 years ago. Brandon, we call him Employee Zero. Brandon was a salesperson for a while, an engineer at the same time. You're now doing marketing stuff for us. I think he was the phone fix-it guy and the IT guy. Brandon's like Employee Zero. He's done a ton of stuff. Great to have joined this team. But in the last 3 years, I did a lot of work building up our commercial side of the house. And effective the beginning of this year, FSLogix decided to go back to what is my roots, which is Fed, right? So I have been working very hard to recruit people that I think are best of industry. I had Mr. Kevin Brown join me. Kevin Brown and I, if you know either one of us, you'll know we worked together at VMware. VMware, I did a lot of work around EUC. I was one of the core team members there when they started EUC, and we just did a ton of work. So I recruited Kevin Brown, got him to come over and join us, so he and I are teamed up together. We also added a gentleman by the name of Matt Quigg. If you know Matt Quigg, he's been in the federal market for a while. Now, he's just a young pup, so you can't say that he did things like started EUC in federal, but he has done some really good things. I am excited to have him on board. He's a great addition to the team. He's a hard rower. You'll often hear me say things like, get in the boat and row. I want to make sure everybody's rowing. And he's a hard rower. So he's a great guy. He is handling our inside sales and biz dev type stuff. So great resource. And then the last person that's part of the team is Mr. Jason Beach. Jason is part of our channel and alliance team, and he is making sure that we get partners, et cetera, all set up so that as we start moving forward heavy into this federal market, that we have everything to do or everything together so we can get done what we want to get done. Now, why is that important to me that I announced to all you guys on the call? Well, ultimately, it's because we've all been in this journey going through desktop transformation. A couple things I guess I need to point out here is our customer list, right? We're all over the board, right? We got customers in Fed, we've got customers in commercial, healthcare, finance. I'm telling you, for the last 3 years, was really busy doing installs. At one time, I was doing over 8 installs a day, right? So we're all over the place. We got a lot of customers out there, and it's allowed us to really focus on our partners, right? So if you're a partner listening to this, we are partner friendly. We love the partner ecosystem. Now, I'll remind you guys, if you worked with me before, I expect partners to be able to do some work. So, we want the smart guys. This will be your value add that you can give to customers. And then last, our alliances. I get asked often, Dave, who do you not work with, right? And I'll be honest, this is an honest answer. There's nobody I don't work with. I get asked, is Microsoft unfriendly to us, or AWS, or Citrix, any of these partners, right? And we help just make their solutions better. And I think by the time that I'm finished with this presentation, you'll see where I'm coming from on how we can make any environment better. Okay? So the last part I really want to talk about, and this is important before I go into tech stuff, for you engineers, right? If you're a young pup, I'm sorry I'm about to offend you, but if you're not, it's really important to understand that our team, okay, is a bunch of gray-haired old fools, right? Some of us are even bald, right? Except for a sales guy, and he's got great teeth and pretty hair, but, sales guys are supposed to have that, right? So we have experience. And the important part about that is we see what has happened on the EUC journey is we have had a lot of stumbles in EUC, right? Especially when it comes to virtualization. And there were things that we have tried to do that I'm going to talk about in a minute that just weren't right. So we've got the experience. We've been there, done that, not once, but probably twice. So now with new tools, doing things differently, we're able to address things different. So FSLogix is really about enabling workspace transformation, right? I often get asked, well, Dave, do you work in the cloud, the private cloud, the public cloud, physical, virtual? Where do you work? And the answer is everywhere, right? I can show you a use case for physical, public cloud, private cloud. There's a ton of places I can show you use cases for what FSLogix does. And as we think about all those use cases, let's just say you're on physical and thinking of going to private cloud, right? And what are you doing to get that user environment over there? And if you haven't done this migration before, the hardest part about the entire thing is moving the user profile, apps, and data. And why is that? Well, because we've had a hard time getting our hands around it, right? So the FSLogix product suite comes together to add some flexibility and functionality to fix things that we haven't had to deal with in the past. So let's talk about what we're ultimately fixing. So as we looked at the physical PC and we tried to move that experience into the data center, there were things that we learned that we had to do. Like, you know what? I want non-persistence because I want to manage my desktop as an image, and I want the user to log in and get the rest of their stuff, right? So we have had to do unexplainable, and I'll just leave it at that. That's as clean as I can put it, things to make that work, right? We had to separate the profile, right? Because I don't want a user to have a persistent desktop. I want them to log into a new machine, and the user wants to have a persistent desktop. So we've had to build their profile. Well, what happens when we build their profile? Well, oftentimes what happens is I log into the machine, and in the background, the machine goes out to a file share, which is sitting on storage arrays, right? And pulls a whole bunch of data across the wire, right? And plops it down on the machine, okay? And for discussion purposes, that's all the stuff in C users percent username. Well, end users are sometimes hoarders and messy, right? And they may put 500 documents on their desktop. And do we want to transfer all 500 desktop documents to their desktop? I don't think an end user can effectively work on 500 documents in a day. But we put all this stuff out there, and it sits there, and it does nothing, right? Except for, hey, it's Friday, and it's payroll day, and I got to do time reporting, and I need to open up my time reporting, spreadsheet, right? So I open that one document that day, I spend the rest of the day in there. So every time we log in, we transfer all this data from location A to the virtual desktop. And ultimately, what's happening in the background is we're writing all that data back out to the storage array because we virtualized and we need to store it somewhere. So we took it from point A, brought it to point B, and we're actually putting it back on point A in a different container. So with FSLogix, we say stop the madness, right? Stop copying data from point A to point B back to point A and just leave it on point A. Don't even copy it to point B, but make it think it's on point B, right? So with our technology around our containers, that's what we're doing. So on Office 365, which is a big pain point in profiles, we're intercepting folders. So on profiles, it's C users percent username. Everything from percent username and below is actually in a VHD out on your storage array. Okay, and with Office, there's a whole bunch of folders, but for Mail, we'll talk about that. For Mail, it's updated local Microsoft Outlook, right? The OSTs, right? We're going to intercept that folder and we're going to put it out on a container on your storage array. Now, why is that so much dramatically different? I'm like speaking about, changing the moon here, right? Why is that so dramatically different? Well, number one, I'm not unnecessarily copying data from point A to point B. I only access the data on point A when I actually need to utilize it, right? So this PowerPoint I got here has about 600 slides in it. And if you don't believe me, ask Brandon. We cut out a whole bunch of slides because there's different presentations in it. But do I need all 600 slides? Absolutely not, right? I don't think this team wants to hear, or the people on this call want to hear about architecting for yesterday, right? We want to talk about what we're doing today, right? But I have some slides that go through architecting for yesterday. So as we start to look at that, I'm accessing the blocks, not the file. And when we change that conversation from a file level conversation to a block level conversation, it means the only blocks I have to read are the blocks that I'm actually utilizing, right? Which means on my 112 meg PowerPoint, I may only read 13 megs worth of data. So I don't have to transfer all that other stuff back and forth. And that gives us a much more efficient storage conversation and a much more efficient user conversation. And when we look at Mail, it gets even worse, right? Outlook itself wants to open and close the OST, which is very large, can be as large as terabytes. Generally, it's less than 50 gig, but it could be very large. It wants to open and close that OST roughly once every other second, okay? And when we think about that, think about the file open and closes. And if I'm running, we're going to just use some rough numbers here. If I'm running 1,000 users, that's 500 file opens and closes per second. So the math is 1,000 divided by 2 equals how many file opens and closes per second. And if you think about the impact on your storage controller, what happens is we get queuing going on. And those grow from 500 to 550 to 600 to 700 to 1,000. And then it slows down. It gets back down to 300 and then it builds back up, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that experience is just not good, right? So with FSLogix, we change what happens. Instead of doing a file open on the storage controller, we do a file open on the endpoint, and then it's all block level reads and writes throughout there. So it really changes the behavior that's going on in the infrastructure. And that's why we can actually work significantly better on the same controller as file mounts or file level OST redirection with container interception, right? So it gives us a much more efficient conversation. And ultimately what we're looking at, let's dig into this a little bit more, is taking that data, okay, that is out on the network share, right, putting it into a container, right? I'm not talking about transforming the OST or anything like that. I'm just saying take the same data that you'd put out on share, put it into a container, and now we change that conversation because it's a single mount, right? And everything else is as if it's local. Now, very, very important part. A lot of companies out there have started advertising and doing OST containers, right? FSLogix was first, but they have, gotten on the bandwagon, which we would expect them to do, and have started doing this. Now, why would you not just go and get the freebie that so-and-so is offering, right? Well, ultimately, it's because it's not ever just about mail, right? At first, it's going to be about your mail. Then it's going to be about your OneDrive. Then it's going to be about Link, right? And then it's going to be about, my Teams doesn't work, or my Skype for Business doesn't work, or, you know what, SharePoint's kind of slow. Can you fix that, right? It's all these other things. And that's why we call it the Office 365 container. It's about all the tools that you need to run your Office environment, right? It's not just the OST. It's the OST. It's the global address book for Link or Skype. It's the, data that is in OneNote and Teams, et cetera, et cetera. We're grabbing all that stuff so that we can make sure that the entire user experience is captured in that container, not just mail. Because mail, that problem, it'll get you probably 48, maybe 48 hours to 2 weeks until the end user says, oh no, the rest of this stuff is terrible, right? So we want to make sure that it's a total solution for that environment that you can implement. And then our next piece of technology is our profile container. Now, the profile container is not all that different than the O365 container. Same technology. We're going to take all that stuff, we're going to intercept it, we're going to put it out on a network storage share, right? And we're going to access it as if it was local. And when we're done here, you'll see me, I'm going to dig into what we're doing, and you'll see what I mean by access it as if it was local, right? So what we do is we intercept those folders, CUser, %username, throw it into a container. So now we get to do block level reads and writes versus file level reads and writes. And just to get you some data that you can put your head around, and Brandon will post a link to this, Holstebro Commune, who I got to analyze the data on, was running UPM. And if you're not familiar with what UPM is roaming profiles on steroids. At the time, it was great, right? It gave us a lot of things that roaming profiles didn't give us, right? However, it was built off of what I like to call fetch and retrieve technology. Go out to storage A, pull it back to location B, so I can write it in the background out to storage A again, right? So Holstebro Commune, 3,400 users running UPM, was using 31,000 IOPS all day long for their users. Now, they weren't shocked about it because they become numb to the pain, right? After time, you just accept what it is because there's not much you can do with it. Well, we worked on a project with them, and they decided that we were much better than what they were doing. And over a weekend, this is the part that kind of scared me, but good practice means for good execution. Over a weekend, they migrated their 3,400 users from UPM to FSLogix profile containers, and they analyzed data for the next week and following weeks. And I actually thought they had done something wrong. I thought marketing had been playing with the numbers. You know how those marketing guys always want to make something look good, right? Maybe they missed a comma or something. I couldn't figure it out because they were reporting not 31,000 IOPS anymore, but 2,500 for the same 3,400 users that hadn't changed the way they worked and behaved. The only thing we did was copy data from a storage location into a container and mounted it with different technology. So they went from 31,000 IOPS to 2,500, right? Now, some of you might say something like, and you'd be a little bit right, well, big deal, Dave, it wasn't broke, right? Well, shame on you for saying that, because as stewards of the IT infrastructure, we need to do everything we can to make sure that we're returning the most optimal cost per user back to the business, right? And if we think about the net difference of 29,000 IOPS roughly, how many more users or how much more faster could they have done work, or what other services could they have provided to the company with those 29,000 IOPS that are just all of a sudden available, right? So as we start to look at technology and the evolution of technology, it's important that we visit those things and go, man, I can not only increase my performance to my end user by decreasing my performance on the storage array, but I could also provide more services. I hate these phrases, but that's a win-win, but technically it's a win-win-win, right? So, as we start to look at that as IT architects and engineers, these are the things that we owe it to the company to go investigate and go back and say, hey, you know what, here's what we're doing, this is what it's costing us. If we implement this new technology, this is what we're going to gain out of it, and we can provide more services, right? And I'll be honest with you, if you're not like a couple of my customers and you don't get a promotion out of it, well, shame on you, because you either didn't collect the data or you didn't advertise it well enough, or nobody knew how bad it was, right? So as we start to look at that, those are very important things that as engineers and architects that we bring back to the company. right, that we bring back to the agency, right? We want to make sure that we're addressing those issues and we're making it so that the user's environment is better. So let's talk about the next piece of technology, and this is truly game changing. You'll see what we're going to do here in a minute. So for the last 20 years, we have used Zen App and Zen Desktop and all these other products to do ultimately one thing: separate applications and bring them back together so they look like they're all coming from the same machine, right? So, you've got your marketing team, they've got a certain amount of applications. You've got the legal team, they got applications. You got all these other teams, right, doing things. And all their applications are somewhat alike, but not really alike, right? And what do we end up with? We end up with silos, right? I've got app one on silo one. There may be 10, 15, 30 servers serving it. I've got app two on silo two, and it's the same thing, rinse and repeat, right? And let's just say we architected this. We're using 3 apps and 3 stacks, and I think it shows 10 divvies up there each. So I've got 30 servers there, probably all running at 50 to 60% capacity, right? Well, what if I could have 2 servers running, or one environment, not 2 servers, one environment, a single image, running 20, maybe 25 servers instead of 30, and running at the same 60% environment. That's a net cut of 10 to 5 servers, right? So I'm able to reduce the amount of infrastructure that I might need to support that environment. And this is the one that'll blow your brain, reduce the complexity, right? One image, right? How much time do we spend managing images, figuring out how to make applications work? I got this published app, that published app, and this desktop that I'm dealing with, and bringing all that stuff together. You got to be a smart guy to do that, right? And I'm not against smart guys, right? I think, and gals, I think smart people, are what keep IT going. But do we need to spend all of our brain cells thinking about app A is on this infrastructure, app B is on that infrastructure? How do I make it all work, right? And the answer in the FSLogix world is no. We say, hey, throw it all into the same image, right? I may have an image for desktops and Windows 7s, 2008, 2016, 2012, et cetera, and throw it all into one image, right? And by throwing it all into one image, what that allows me to do is say, hey, now all I got to do is figure out what app you need, right? And with FSLogix, what we can do is we can say, hey, we can hide, we call it masking, we can mask that application that's not needed by the user away. So when our filter driver kicks in, what happens is I get a custom view of the applications, right? Now, if you're a really smart engineer, you'd be like, well, Dave, that's against licensing rules, and let me show you in the end how it's not, right? Microsoft loves us, and Adobe does too, because it makes licensing very, very easy, right? Because ultimately what our filter driver does is it removes that layer of the file system from the user's view. So no, the application isn't on the image for that user, right? So it gives us a very, very simple audit point, right? Control point. And, if I want to add an application to a user, all I got to do is add them to an Active Directory group, right? So right now, my world may be, hey, give an application, these whatever applications I have, and I don't need Adobe Reader or Adobe Write Pro, and then I change that and I want to add that to them, right? So all I have to do is add a user to an Active Directory group. Visio is the greatest one that I can use as an example. How many people have Visio that don't even use it? And part of the reason they have it is because IT has been getting hammered for so long, because it takes so long to deploy an application. We're just like, spray and pray, right? Spray it out there and pray we don't get audited. And so we've put this application out there and over entitled it, and that's an audit point, right? That's a license compliant point. With FSLogix, we say spray it out there. You don't have to do any more praying, right? Because we're going to mask it away from the user. And if the user needs it, all I have to do is move them from one Active Directory group to another, and voila, they will have the application. So let's talk about the last piece of our technology. Well, it's actually not the last piece because I got an announcement we're going to talk about, but our Java control, right? I don't know of any industry that doesn't have a Java problem. I know of a lot of people that are in denial of Java problems, but I don't know of anybody that doesn't have a Java problem. And let me give you the scenario. So let's just say I work for NASA, right? NASA's a pretty big organization, right? They got lots of projects out there. And I do a project with Java, and let's go back in time. 5 years ago, I did a project with Java. And let's just say that at the time, the production releasing version of Java was 1.4, right? And I just spent $1 billion of taxpayer money on this project. So we deployed out with 1.4, right? And that was for the, making plants grow in a zero G, zero error environment application. We'll just call it that, right? The plant app, right? Well, do you think the guys that are designing rocket engines want to use the same version of Java? No. They built a new application 2 years ago. And that's the Brandon Lee app. We'll call that the rocket engine because he's smart as a rocket scientist, right? So they built theirs in 1.7 because that was the current version shipping. So do I go and tell all my customers you can't use the plant app anymore because the rocket science app is now at the latest and greatest version? Well, no, that's not what we do, right? If IT's doing that, we're making a huge mistake. What we do is we control and we protect what we must allow, right? Do I want my end user, and this is not as funny today as it used to be 25 years ago, going out to whitehouse.com with a old version of Java? No, absolutely not. But I do want them using that older version of Java on the plant app and the 1.7 version of Java on the Rocket app, right? And maybe I have a new app that just came out this week that's going to be on 1.8 or 1.9 or 2020 or whatever the new number is, right? So it allows me to very, very granularly control what I must allow, right? Old firewall friend of mine used to say, Dave, you can't deny what you must allow, right? Can't deny somebody to go to port 443 if you must allow it, right? So that's what we're doing is we're saying, hey, I got to allow this, right? But I'm going to control where it is. Now, I know a lot of you IA guys, right, are going to go, oh, my goodness, he's talking, anti something or other, right? Because, everybody's got to be running the latest and greatest version of Java, right? Well, the answer is no. We need to put rules and controls in place to make sure those apps that we have developed and spent money on are utilizing the correct version of Java, and we don't have to redevelop them and re-spend money on them unnecessarily, and not allow a user to take an unsecure version of Java to an extraneous website. That's what I'm saying. Now, I know this makes the IA guys, head spin because it's a little hard to work, right? I have to allow exceptions. I got to check for rules and things like that. But this is allowing us to be very, very fluid and flexible without compromising security. All right, so that's it on Java. Enough lecture on that. If you want to talk about that later, by all means, reach out to me. So when we talk about our products, right, you got two choices. You can buy the whole thing as a suite, okay, and you can roll out. It's all the same filter driver, right? You can say, I want to roll it out in pieces. I want to roll it all out together. I only need to fix this one terrible application I have, and la-di-da, right? You can do it however you want. You can also say, no, I just want to buy it individually, right? So maybe, what I talked about today, you're like, I got to go fix that Java problem, right? So you take our Java piece and you buy it. And 3 months from now, you decide, I'm getting my butt kicked by Office 365, and you want to add Office 365. Well, you don't have to re-image, right? All you got to do is add a couple GPO settings or registry settings is technically what they are, configure Office 365 and move forward, right? So it gives you that ability to pick what you need and deploy what you need and not have to worry about, I got to add or I got to go through change control, for a second product implementation or I got to do a second product testing, et cetera, et cetera. It really gives us that flexibility to be able to do what we need to do in our infrastructure in the time frame that we need to do it. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about pricing, but important to remember it's per product, per app, per user, usually per year. You can buy subscription or perpetual. It depends on what you negotiate. I would encourage, if you want to know more about pricing, reach out to us and let a sales guy that actually knows how much it is, 'cause I'll probably overvalue it and mess that whole conversation up. So let's get into our demo. I'm going to hit out of my screen here, and I'm going to minimize my stuff here. And you can see I got my Outlook up. It's doing some cool stuff. It's running in cache mode. I want to just quick show you, look, I'm going through, I'm reading emails. I mean, they're updating, it's pulling. It's all just like it was local. Life is wonderful, right? So let's close some of this stuff. We're going to see if I can make Outlook freak out today, or excuse me, PowerPoint freak out today. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about the underpinnings of what's going on with ODFC, right? So I'm going to fire off this little script that's going to show us some stuff so that I can show you what the tech is behind the scenes, right? So the first piece of tech that we want to talk about is what is going on with the disk, right? So ultimately what we're doing is we are taking a folder, and you can see here I have App Data Local Microsoft, and we're taking this Outlook folder and we're shoving it into a VHD. And here you can see I've got some VHDs mounted, right? I'm actually going to assign a drive letter to this so we can actually take a peek inside, and we'll just use E, that's fine. You wouldn't normally do this for a user, but we're going to do this for demo purposes. We're going to just take a peek inside. So notice I got a whole bunch of stuff. Remember I said it's not just about Outlook, right? If any of you think it's just about Outlook, be very, very careful. You're going to limit your career because it's never just about Outlook, right? So here we're going to go into the ODFC folder here. Notice I got a whole bunch of stuff in here, right? This is all the contents. If I go back a folder, this is, if I go back to, whoops, don't want to go back a folder. I want to go back a window. There we go. If I go into this folder, look, see that little text document I created there? It's the same one. If I go into here, it's right here, right? Little text document, right? It's just intercepting that folder and shoving it into a container, right? So when you saw me click on this folder, and let me do this one more time for you, right? When you saw me up here and I clicked on here, it doesn't look any different, doesn't behave any different. It's just right there, right? Now, ultimately, that's coming from a profile, or excuse me, a ODFC mount. So let's go look at what does it look like under the covers, right? So here you'll see, let's find our App Data Local Microsoft Outlook. There it is. Got it outlined or highlighted. So I'm taking this disk, this path, right, and I'm intercepting it, and I'm putting it into another path, okay? Now, I want you to see something else. I've got a whole bunch of those listed, right? This is how we look at this and go, hey, FSLogix is working, right? Look at this. This is what I call bad junction, right? And this is what you want to be wary of, right? Notice that that VHD mount shows up as a junction. This is what everybody else in the industry is doing. You're just doing a junction, a symbolic link if you remember what those are, right? Or if you're old enough to remember what those are. Now, why are those bad? Well, ultimately, they're bad for multiple reasons. Office in protected mode, Adobe in low integrity mode, OneDrive will not talk across a junction because what doesn't happen across junctions? Add, change, delete notifications, right? So as we start to look at this, I want you to look at the way an FSLogix directory shows up. So let me click next, and here we go. So remember that Outlook folder. So here we are. See users, demo user 2, App Data Local Microsoft Outlook. Look at that folder. That's the Outlook folder, right? Look at that. It just shows up as a directory, right? It does not show up as a junction. Look at the OneDrive folder. It's just a directory. Now let me go prove to you back here. Look at this. We're doing the intercepts. There's the Outlook. If I look around here far enough, I'll find somewhere. There's OneDrive, right? Well, one of the OneDrives. There's a whole bunch of OneDrives. Here's the other OneDrive, right? So those are all being intercepted and put into the VHD. And what you're really buying from FSLogix is the technology, the filter driver, that allows you to use that junction, because that's all we're doing is a junction, but we're masking it away from the app, the user, the OS, and even the admin sometimes, right? Got to go look special to know this is working, right? So we're masking that all away, so your app just works as if it was local, right? Probably some of the most successful VDI implementations that we have in the industry and I'm ashamed to say this because I pushed hard for non-persistence, right? The most successful VDI industry implementations are persistent desktops. And I am anti-persistent desktop because all you did is move the problem from the edge to the data center and gave it to somebody else to deal with, right? You didn't get image optimization, single image management, app deployment ease, security. I mean, you didn't get any of that stuff. You just moved it from the desk into the data center and gave a different team the responsibility, right? So as we start to look at that, FSLogix is kind of the persistent desktop crutch or fix it, right? You can get very, very persistent because everything we do appears to be at local versus fetch and retrieve and rebuild, right? So it really changes what we're doing. So last thing I want to show you as part of this is what's going on with profiles. So that's ODFC. I showed you ODFC working. Oh, the most important thing I forgot to tell you is if you were one of those admins that went out and shut down search because the database rebuilt, with FSLogix on Windows 7, we take the entire database. On RDSH 2012 and higher, we take the mail database. And look at here, I have search being cached as my index, and we'll do a search for diamonds. Big James Bond fan. We'll see if he shows up in my, no, diamonds are. Let's just narrow this down. Up there is no, there's some diamonds are. Let's do forever and see if I got any special messages. No special messages. So notice that search just works, right? And what I'm able to do is expend those cycles, let the user do the searching, and give them that search capability without eating up all the CPU every day, every time the user logs in, right? Now, one of you guys out there, probably pretty smart, done the testing, and said, well, Dave, have you looked at online search? It's pretty effective. And the answer is, yes, I have looked at online search. And if you look at what happens when you run an online search, actually, I wish I had still had mail open, but we'll just use the thing I did just a second ago. If you don't exit out of the search window, online search keeps asking the online server, hey, did you find it? Did you find the word diamonds? Is there anything new for the word diamonds? Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? It's kind of like that annoying kid when you're on the long car drive that's been in the back seat and didn't have an iPad to play with for too many hours, right? It just wants to keep knowing, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? And if you look at your CPU and your network utilization, you will be shocked. You will probably freak out, right? Because, let's just say the user was me and I started the word diamonds and I got distracted, and Dave would never get distracted, right? Got distracted, went over to talk to somebody, ended up walking into a meeting, came back 3 hours later while my session was asking the online servers every millisecond, did you get it? Did you get it? Did you get it? And eating up 30% of the CPU utilization, right? And just because I forgot to close a window, right? So, these are all things that we need to consider as we start to deploy and put out our infrastructures and our designs, right? So let's move on to the profiles discussion because it's the easiest discussion of the day. We do the same darn thing, but instead of intercepting a big long path, it's really simple. We go to see users. I'm just going to type that in up here. Actually, we'll just back up and boom, we'll get to see users. And there we go. And we intercept this. Now, notice I got this local demo user. We put some junk in there that you don't really want to keep around, right? We do some things with credentials so that, they're not out on the file share because every 12 hours you need to rekey. And if you don't have access to where you're writing the key, how are you going to rekey, right? So all that kind of stuff, we treat it as if it was local, right? Do the same thing with profiles. Now, if you're paying attention, you'll say, well, Dave, why would I need ODFC if you're intercepting C users percent username, because the ODFC stuff is in app data local Microsoft Outlook? And you'd be right. You'd be very, very right. But there's some reasons to consider doing both, right? One of the reasons is sometimes you don't want to mess with your current profile solution and it's an afterthought. But a bigger reason is two different types of data. ODFC, office data folder containers, are different data. It's recreatable cache, which means I can delete it, destroy it, mess it up, and rebuild it without impact. Profile data is not easily recreatable. It's your resume. It's your status report. It's your promotion letter, right? Whatever you want to call it, right? It's all these things that users spend time creating. So we may want to put that data on two different types of storage, two different types of restrictions, two different types of backup schedules, right? It may change how we want to interact with that data. So therefore, you might want both products, right? And the last reason is search is licensed under our ODFC product. We believe there's enough value there to just justify that in itself, right? To say, hey, we'll go and put it under there. So very, very similar technologies, some overlap, but there's reasons to use the two technologies and make sure that you're designing appropriately. So that's it for profiles and ODFC. I want to move into the next discussion, which is around apps, right? So let's hit the apps piece real quick, and let me just close out some of this stuff. So I have a little script here to get everything fired up that I need to get fired up. And what we're going to do is we're going to remove an application from this machine. Okay, so let's take a look at what we have here. We're going to start with, this is the install folder, right, for Office 365 or 2016, as some people like to refer to it. And here's add remove programs. Let me just show you, boom, 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 somewhere down here. There it is. There's Office 2016, right? And you all saw me using PowerPoint 2016. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a quick little rule here. So I'm just going to do this. Now, don't anybody go think you can get coffee or anything. So we'll call this the Fed Gurus. We'll put an S, no apostrophe, because that won't demo. And then we'll just put some random numbers and letters down there so you know I'm not faking it, right? Because this is all live. This is not, there's no rehearsing to this. This is real. So all I have to do is go down here and find Office, which is usually the hardest part. There it is, right? And I hit scan. Now, you don't even have time to get coffee because look at this. It is pretty well done. Well, there it is. It's done. I click OK, and it generates me. If I actually click OK, it'll generate me and give me my rules. 342 rules. Watch what happens when I click on this little magic button here. I call it the magic button. I want to be a magician when I was a kid. I'm going to apply this rule for testing, right, to this system, and watch what happens. So I'll get a little prompt. I'll tell it yes, and watch my icons in the desktop. Notice things changed, right? Let's go back to that folder. Notice this folder is empty, right? Now, just in case, maybe you did go get that coffee. You weren't listening to me. I know what it's like. It's Wednesday. Got a lot of work to get done. Watch this. I'm going to take this rule off. Give me just a second. And look at what happens. Now you see it. Now you don't. Now you see it. Now you don't. Now let's go take a look at Control Panel, right? So let me hit refresh here. And let's go look for Office 2016. It's not there, right? It's gone, right? Let me take the rule off. Let me come back here. I'll hit refresh. There it is, right? So what this gives me the capability to do is remove that application. I didn't do app virtualization, right? Which a lot of us, and I was guilty. I thought app virtualization was going down the right path, right? I thought, hey, VMware had figured out this whole isolate the OS from the hardware. Well, let's isolate the application from the OS, right? Because then we have double isolation. Well, it didn't work, right? How many people, and if you were one of those and you want to prove it to me, by all means, reach out to me. Did anybody truly achieve utopia? All your applications are virtualized. You didn't have to worry about them interacting directly with the operating system. Probably didn't, right? Because it's really hard. It's not easy, right? So now if you got 4 applications and one of them's WordPad and the other's Notepad and Paint and Chrome, that doesn't count, right? That's not applications. That's you playing around with something, right? But if you had a true desktop environment where you had all these applications running, we never got what we wanted, right? We never got that true app isolation and virtualization because it just was too hard and too cumbersome. So from FSLogix, we say take the total opposite approach. Install it natively, mask it away from a user that doesn't need it, and run it natively, right? So let's take a look at what happens when I want to push this out to production. So here we go. I've assigned this rule. By default, we say don't apply it to anybody. We're going to say apply that to everyone, right? And then I would add a user group process. There's a whole bunch of things I could do, but I'm going to add a group, and I'd call this group my Office 2016 group, right? And it's just an AD group. Now, you can see I'm doing this demo on Workspaces, right? They're not going to let me modify their AD, so it's going to error out a little bit. You'll get a bunch of, blank, right? But what I would do is I'd say, yes, apply this group to everyone, mask it. Don't apply this group to the Office 2016 users. So deny everyone the application, but allow the users in Office 2016, right? So now I could do something really, really crazy. I could add Office 2013. I could add OpenOffice. I could add Visio, PowerPoint, you name it, right? Plugins, all sorts of stuff, right? And activate those with an Active Directory group or entitle those with an Active Directory group. So now my user logs in, and let's just say, hey, you were a 2013 shop, you did 2013 first, you're trying to roll out 2016, you got a schedule, and you start with payroll, right? So you do the migration from 2013 to payroll. It's just they drag some users from one Active Directory group to another, ask them to log in. All of a sudden, they're seeing 2016. Life is good, right? Till that little old lady that cuts your paycheck calls you, and she says, Dave, all my macros don't work in 2016, and it's Friday, and payroll's due at 2 o'clock, and it's 1:48 Central. So you got an hour and 12 minutes to figure out how to make that work, or you're not getting paid, right? And you freak out, right? I mean, who doesn't want to get paid, right? I mean, geez. Well, government doesn't want to pay everybody once in a while, but hey, the most of us want to get paid, right? So you panic and you're like, what do I do? How do I roll back? La-di-da, la-di-da. Do I roll everybody back? Do I just roll a little old lady that's my best friend? Is she going to get me paid? How do I handle this, right? Well, it's really simple. You just take that little old lady, who may not be a little old lady, she might be a 21-year-old lady, right? And you move her from the 2016 group back to the 2013 group, let her figure it out. And then you might go back and say, hey, you know what? We really want you on 2016, but we don't want to expend all the effort to rewrite your payroll app and macros into 2016. So you know what? We'll give you Office 2016 and Excel 2013, and we'll associate the file extension. We'll call it like Get Me Paid, right? .Get Me Paid. And we'll make sure that that works for you also. So you can have both of them, right? Now, I know that's crazy talk, but yeah, actually you could do that with FSLogix. So it gives you that flexibility to make those migrations and changes as desired. Now, the last thing I'll talk to you about is, let's use Visio as an example, right? So you deploy out Visio, you own 10 licenses, you notice that 9 are being used, your best friend calls you, he's an architect, and he is going into a meeting to present to whatever branch chief, right? And he calls you up and he's like, dude, Dave, I don't have Visio on my machine. I need to show a drawing of how we're, taking over the world with desktop virtualization. Can you get it to me? Right? And you say, sure. When do you need it by? And he's like, I'm 9 minutes away from my meeting. And in the old world, you said, dude, sorry, you're done. Right? It'll take me 3 days to get it to you. Right? Well, in the FSLogix world, you say, not a problem. I'm adding you to the group. We're not overusing our licenses. Boom, you're entitled, Joe. Have a nice day. Go win the project, right? And it's as simple as changing from one Active Directory group to another, right? Or adding to an Active Directory group. So I could literally deploy that application in seconds because everything's all been pre-staged, right? And some of you are out there going, wow, that's awesome for virtualization. What about physical? Same thing, right? You deploy a master image to all your desktops. You mask away every app they don't need, and you only allow them the app they need. And a desktop comes back in, you're not sanitizing and scrubbing Joe's computer. Well, who knows what Joe was doing, but you're really just re-imaging it with the master image. It's got all the applications. You redeploy it, right? Next user logs in, and based off their Active Directory groups, they see only what they need to see. Now, somebody out there is probably going, well, Dave, how do you license that? I got 30,000, desktops in my environment. I don't want to license 30,000 copies of Visio. I only want to license 30. Well, using our tools, what you'd be able to do is run a report and say, hey, here's a group, and we'll see what this comes up with. Oh, I got a new query, I think is what I got to hit cancel. I got to do the report from different. I clicked a little too early. Let me get to the report. Save that. There it is. So you would run a report, and I'll just do today. There's not going to be anything in it because it's just today. But anyway, you'll see what it does. It'll come up, and it'll tell you how many users have utilized the applications, right, during the specific period, what the license count was, and what your average was, right? So when Microsoft comes in knocking on your door saying, hey, we want to know how many copies of Visio you're running, right? They can run their little tools, and this is a true story. It happened over in the UK. They ran their little audit tool on their infrastructure and came back awestruck. They were like, you're not running any applications. Well, yeah, they created a group, or, an Active Directory account called Microsoft Come Get Me, right? Gave them login rights. They ran their tool. Microsoft Come Get Me wasn't entitled to any FSLogix apps, right? So they saw nothing, right? So that really threw up their, tentacles and went back to their engineers and said, we're not seeing any applications. What's wrong, right? So they said, well, we're using FSLogix. They were all confused. I ended up working with them, showing them how we use our FXAs, which are authorization files, and Active Directory. And you'll see here I'm referencing an FXA, right, and Active Directory. So you look at the FXA, and the FXA say it's only to this one group. You go look at that Active Directory group, and you see that there's 1, 10, 10 million, whatever your count is, users in there, and you validate that with your license count, right? So let's just say it was 10, and you have 10 licenses, you're good to go. If it's 10, you have 100 licenses, start asking for a discount, right? Or renegotiate your contract, right? So it gives us that flexibility to do just-in-time deployment of licenses and applications without being subject to an audit. All right, I've done a lot of talking. We're going to cover the last thing. I'm going to close all this stuff out. And we talked about Java. There's not a whole lot of more I can tell you of Java other than writing the rules. It's that simple. So let's go back to our PowerPoint, which is still working good. It survived me removing Outlook and all that good stuff. And let's talk about the next piece. So let me get that out there. So at Citrix Synergy, and Brandon, if I'm wrong, please correct me, we announced Cloud Cache. Now, Cloud Cache from an engineering and architecture perspective is really, really cool, right? Ultimately, what we heard is all the stuff you're doing is really, really cool, but how do we use it in the cloud, right? And what are we going to do, right? So as we started to look at what's going on in the cloud, we saw a lot of things. I'll let you guys look at this eye candy chart. I need a drink of water. But ultimately, what it comes down to is there's a whole lot of stuff going around with Cloud Desktop, right? And ultimately, as I see it, is we cut our teeth on desktop virtualization, and then at mass, people are looking at doing cloud, right? Why put it on my own storage and my own infrastructure if I can go buy it for pennies per user, right? So as we start to look at that, there's a lot of interest right now, right? And as we look at the good and the bad, right? The good is, a lot of people are using it. The bad is it can be expensive, right? And the most important part I want to show you is 35% of the money is on wasted or unused resources. Copying data from one location of storage to make it look like it was local back to the same storage array, right? That's a wasted transaction, right? Not being able to optimize, right? And then this is a very, very important one. Storage can amount to over 25% of the bill, right? So as we start to think about how can we make that better, right? So as we start to look at some more information, right, there's a whole thing. If you look at Azure Page Blobs, right, it's 4.7 cents, 4.5 cents per gigabyte, 1.5 cents per 10,000 writes. 64K of data is another 0.00024 cents, right? There's a whole calculation to come up with change, right? So if we look at what happens with Outlook, just as an example, right? 19,000 writes and 3 megs written, right? Just for one email. right? 2,700 reads and 13.8 megs read, right? For the email, right? And it's just text, right? So a whole lot of data. So how does FSLogix plan to make this better? Well, as you all told us, right? We want redundancy, we want storage technical solutions, right? We want DR, and we want reduced storage cost, right? So we introduced Cloud Cache. Ultimately, what it allows us to do is we gave you a product that says, hey, we can do local cache, we can do cloud connectivity. It's going to give us storage continuity, optimize storage costs, right? Because now I don't have to repetitively do reads, right? It's going to reduce our file server load, right? And it's only going to save us some money on our local storage, right? All this is included in the Office 365 and Profile Container, right? We'll talk about some ups. Well, here's some more things. We can use it. This is outside of what's included. We can use it to say, hey, instead of doing just local, due to a remote data center, secondary data center, maybe go out to AWS or Azure, right? There's all sorts of different combinations we can do. And the most important thing is FSLogix will keep it all in sync for you. You don't have to worry about this, right? So what are the benefits, right? We talked about the enhanced storage continuity, right? So a lot of times we design for DR. I got data center with multiple storage arrays or a data center with, 2 different locations that we write to. We can do that big easy button, right? We handle the remediation, the failover, right? The interruptions we can queue locally, right? All this stuff we handle, right? It is the big easy button for the desktop admin. You don't have to go have a very difficult 15-hour conversation with the storage guy. You say, hey, I need some low-performing disk. I need 3 terabytes of it in location A, location B. Just publish it as CIFS, and I'll go do the rest. And you're going to be the storage guy's best friend because he doesn't have to think, right? And you're not going to have to yell at him because they didn't get the replication right. They were doing sync when they should have done async or vice versa. Who knows, right? So it really changes what we're doing with the storage team, right? Allows us to do things like offline access for laptops, right? Maybe I have a use case where I don't want my data at risk, floating around, and I want to do, local cache, and if they're, powered up and all that, it's good, but I don't want them to be able to keep it. There's a lot of different offline scenarios, right? Maybe I want them to have it, but I want it to be replicated to the data center just in case something happens, right? Storage location moves. This is a real life story. Very big customer of ours kicked out one storage provider, brought in another storage provider. That never happens, right? And we're freaked out of the process of replicating all this stuff, right? Well, from the profile side of the house, it was really easy. We just added a storage location, bring one up, bleed one down, boom, you're done, right? They actually sent me a note saying it was the easiest storage move they had ever done, right? So, it gives us the capability to enhance that. Globally redundant DR. Now, this was, in my Fed world, we think about a lot of things, right? Things that the rest of the world doesn't have to think about. A lot of what ifs, right? This gives us the ability to make sure that the end user is able to have that globally redundant DR without all the complication that you used to think about, right? Make sure that data, we can make it follow the sun, follow the moon, whatever you want, right? It gives us the capability to have that data at multiple locations. Desktop as a service enablement, right? This is, to me, is like a no-brainer. This is what we should be thinking about, right? Everything's desktop as a service in my mind, but when you look at the true model, it gives us the ability to get your local VHD or local profile into a container out into the data center so that you can go through that migration. So, like I said, we have 2 options: the built-in, right, which is continuity, optimizing your storage costs, reducing your file server load, and ultimately saving on your local storage, right? That's all built in, no extra cost. And then we have the add-on module, which allows us multiple uses, multiple locations. It enables a ton of stuff, right? So let's go into Q&A. So Brandon, I've been talking a long time. I'm going to let you give me the 3 best questions you got, if there's 3.
Yeah. So one of the first ones here is I'll just run. Actually, this one's pretty good. How would one go about sizing architecturally? Is it just one VHD per user, regardless of what FSLogix technologies are using? And do you support multiple sessions for the same user?
So there's a lot of answers on the VHDs. Okay, it's one VHD per technology normally. But if you're doing multi-session, depending on what you're doing multi-session, I'm assuming let's assume, you know what assuming does to us, right? Let's assume you're talking about multi-session. I have a XenApp user pulling from multiple locations. Well, you might need to go with what we call our multi-session technology and actually have a VHD per session, right? We have some stuff built in to kind of try and consolidate that, but that is one thing that you might have to think about. If you're thinking of multi-session as in I have two desktops, right? I have desktop A, desktop B, because I have applications that don't behave well together. You can use what we call multi-session there, which would be, one VHD per user per session, right? This does not accommodate going across networks. Those of you from the GovSpace will know what I'm talking about, right? If you're on different networks, that is a different user, different VHD, right? You can't do any of this across networks. Just old rules apply, right? It's the same thing, just multiple networks. There is also a huge opportunity for you to address, right? So we're talking about the VHD portion of it, but why do you have multiple sessions? Is it because app A doesn't work well in your image for app B? What's the reason that you have users with multiple sessions? Generally, what I aim for with my customers, I say, just off the bat, let's reduce your complexity by 30%, right? So if I have 10 images and I can get you down to 7, does that make your world better, right? And a lot of people are like, yeah, right? Let's go for that, and let's simplify your environment. And then we can do a second phase and reduce it another 30%, so getting it down to 5 images, right? And then do another phase, reducing it again, right? Addressing those image issues and application issues with FSLogix apps so that you don't have to have multiple sessions and multiple VHDs. So if you've got further, deeper dive questions on that, by all means, reach out to us. Okay. At the end of the slide, you'll see there's some information that you can use, and I'll go back to slide 1 when we're done, just so that you can see mine and Kevin's information. So next question, Brandon.
Sure. So this next one is, what happens when I lose connectivity to the share where my FSLogix container is hosted?
Well, prior to Cloud Cache, it was terrible, right? Can't make what you can't touch, right? Can't read what you can't touch. So it was absolutely terrible. Now, we had built in some technology to reconnect that VHD so the user didn't have to log in and log out. But yeah, if your storage is down, you got problems, right? Now, let's be honest. If your storage is down, you got problems. You got big problems, right? You might not be able to get to the RDSH host, right? The XenApp host, the virtual desktop host either, right? So, those are all things that you need to consider. With Cloud Cache, if that was just one storage controller, not all your storage controllers that had a problem, we would absorb that. Anything that was in cache that had been read or wrote during that session would still function. And when that storage controller came back online, or the new path came back online, things would just work like they had been, and life would be good. We would take all the writes that we had queued up, and we'd commit them and flush them out to the storage controller, and any further reading that you needed to do, we'd start pulling from it, and off and on we'd go.
All right, that sounds good, Dave. It looks like we're also 5 minutes over, so I think we should just go ahead and wrap it up here.
Awesome. I know I got on a win. So white papers, product information, all that good stuff can be found on our website. I highly encourage you to go out there and take a look at it. Okay. Everybody asking, what's it take to do a proof of concept? Okay. So it's really simple. You need a file share, right? You're going to need control over your GPOs. You're going to need an image that you can play with, right? You're going to need a test account. You need an hour, right? And that's it. I mean, this is the easiest technology you will probably have dealt with in your entire career, and I believe it will be the biggest game-changing technology that you will have dealt with in your entire career. Virtualization was great, but it was hard, right? This is easy and absolute immediate wins, right? So in order to get that proof of concept going, reach out to us, okay? You can reach out to us at sales@FSLogix. There's also a form on there. Or what you can do is, if I can get to the right slide, you can reach out to, if you're Fed, you can reach out to, there we go, myself or Kevin Brown or Matt Quigg, and we'll schedule an hour with you. We offer for engineers what we call an engineer NFR key. You can use it on your home lab. You can, play with it, test with it, totally unencumbered for a year. We'll renew that, if you ask us to. It's there for you guys to learn on this infrastructure, right? So if you've got questions, you need to get going. Hey, you just want to do your due diligence, right? Sometimes that's the most important part of our job, is making sure that we have vetted other technology to make sure the path we're going on is the right one, right? So if you have any of those, reach out to us, okay? We're here to help, and we will work with you to get you going. So with that, I'm going to wrap up, hand it back to Brandon. Thank you all very much. He's got some post announcements, and I will talk to you all in the next webinar.
Yep. Thanks again, Dave, and thank you all for joining us today on this FSLogix webinar. This webinar has been recorded, so at the conclusion, you will be able to access the recording maybe like 30 minutes or an hour after we wrap up here. But yes, once again, for me and Dave, thank you all for joining, and we hope to see you next time. Have a good one.